everyone. My name is Angie Vishianen, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects pre-law students to lawyers for mentoring so they can learn more about the legal profession before they decide whether or not it's right for them. And we started doing these Zoom meetups last year to bring together pre-law students, current law students, and young lawyers so that you could all learn from professionals and pick up different tips that you can implement in your own careers. And so I'm excited today to introduce to you Suzanne Grubb, and she's going to be talking to you about things that you should be considering if you're making major life transitions. So we'll be doing a short presentation for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for an open Q&A at the end. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. So Suzanne, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Angie. It's nice to meet all of you. So I am the founder of Pivot Points, and I started this company. What this company does is we provide women in major life transitions in divorce, loss of a loved one, marriage, relocation, having a baby. A lot of women tend to get stuck in the process of finding the right professionals, knowing what the next steps are to take. And so we are the front lines, the first resource in providing guidance, financial services, and help towards finding the right professionals. So research shows that women have distinctive financial attitudes, stress responses, gender roles, coping styles, and conflict tolerances. And so today I'll discuss how those relate perhaps to you in your business as lawyers, and just what you should be thinking about if you're going through a major life transition. How I started this business is I was in the finance arena. I was started on the floor of the stock exchange in San Francisco, and then I moved back east to be in investment banking, where I was one of a handful of managing directors for the investment bank Bear Stearns. I moved back to the West Coast and became a portfolio manager, managing investments for high net worth individuals and foundations for Bank of America in the advisory services area. Now, I thought my life was on track and that I was a completely capable and competent woman. And then one day, my world came crashing down. I just moved to a new city and my marriage had become completely untenable. I had to abruptly move out of my house and make a quick, unforeseen pivot. Within the first week of leaving, I had to find a divorce attorney, an apartment to live in, moving and storage, and change all my accounts while holding down a new job. I was lonely, stressed, overwhelmed, and I did not know what to do to reset my life's path. When I needed support and guidance, I didn't know where to go, who to call, and I was completely lost and really vulnerable. So through a series of missteps, I finally got onto a new track, but it could have been so much more seamless and efficient had I had a team to work with me through my transition. So I vowed I never wanted other women to go through this kind of feeling of stress and confusion. And that's why I blended my finance background with my business skills to advise clients on strategies to move them forward through their transition and lending compassion and support along the way. So when it comes to women, let's talk about their financial attitudes first. One of the things I thought was interesting, 76% of women ages 25 to 54 were in the workforce as of August 2019, and women are continuing to earn bachelor's degrees at a faster rate than men. So that's important to keep in mind as I go through the financial attitudes. First, in a March 2020 study of 3,000 men and women of all ages, it was found that nearly half of women have negative emotions around their financial planning. I think that's kind of shocking that this is still happening in today's society, but I get it as we start talking through why this happens. They are not participating equally with their husbands in long-term financial decisions, even though they hold 20 trillion in wealth. There's a persistent gender gap in financial literacy, and I think that's part of it. According to a survey of 1,000 parents, 61% of boys receive lessons from their parents on credit scores, paying taxes, bank accounts, and more about credit card debt. And females were likely to receive literacy on spending and budgeting. So they focus on saving and budgeting, and men are taught about investing and building wealth. So how this manifests later in life, as men get into the workforce, they tend to be more frequent traders, less risk averse, and a little more optimistic about how they handle their finances. Women tend to be saving and swirling away. And as it relates to marriage, what happens is there's a financial spouse and a non-financial spouse. And still to this day, the financial spouse tends to be the male. I think this is critical because one of the things I read from the author and financial guru Susie Orman from many years ago, she said women will always think that, especially if they have children, that their money is for their parents, their spouses, their brothers or sisters, even their pets, everybody but themselves. They tend to nurture, and this is why this is happening. Men, on the other hand, know absolutely that the money they make is for themselves. They don't have trouble saying no. They don't have trouble keeping it for themselves, investing it for themselves, and not sharing it with their spouse. So if the household financial spouse is the man, it's going to be a very different outcome of how the money is being managed for the family. One of the things I wanted to share with you is that I had a client when I was a portfolio manager. I had many clients as a portfolio manager that were married couples. And every time they would come in to me, I found that probably 98% of the time, the men did the talking, the men asked the questions. And when I tried to engage the female, they were a little more hesitant and deferential. And it's not that they weren't actively listening. It's just that they were engaging in a deeper, meaningful way, but they wouldn't participate with the conversation. I'm not so sure the male even wanted the role of taking care of the finances with most of my clients, but it just happened to be that the social and cultural norms, it fell into his lap. So we tailor for pivot points. What we do is we tailor our guidance to the financial literacy skill level of our clients. And what we do is we take them through how we're getting to income statement, how we're getting to their balance sheet, doing the financial education for them, and empowering them to make wiser decisions going forward. Also, I wanted to talk about stress and coping, because I think there's some unique biological stressors that happen with women versus men. And I think that's good to know as you guys continue to go through your life and start gaining clients in the legal profession. Any major life transition causes stress. And we know that. And the top 5 are loss of a loved one, divorce, moving, major illness, injury, and job loss. Second, biologically, during stress, the body releases adrenaline and cortisol. This is true for both men and women. However, it tends to result in a fight or flight response for men, and with women, a tend and befriend response. So, and that stress response specifically builds on the attachment caregiving process in women. So if you are experiencing one of your clients that has a great deal of stress, and it's a female, a more empathic tone can be really helpful. The stress of psychologically, it impacts females and men differently as well. Depression and anxiety disorders are more prevalent in women. And during a critical life change, depression is 2 times more likely to happen for men versus women. When coping with a difficult situation and stress, women are seeking social support and emotional focused coping, whereas men report more problem-solving focused. As it relates to conflict, I think this is really key. Research shows that men versus women utilize a direct aggressive style in dealing with conflict because they don't personalize the conflict, whereas women tend to handle conflict indirectly or avoid it altogether because conflict is emotionally charged for them. They take it personally. I had a client recently who came to me because she wanted to have a settlement, amicable settlement with her husband. They didn't want lawyers and they were going to do this all themselves. And what she wanted is she wanted us to look at her settlement to see if it just made sense. Well, what truly happened is what was going on is not only did his settlement not make sense, he was he was approaching the numbers in somewhat of a nonsensical way. But she just wanted the whole thing to go away. She didn't want to deal with the stress, the conflict. So it was like, so slow down, wait a second, let's breathe through this. And you're entitled to this is what you're entitled to. So we researched the legal ramifications of the state she was in. We calculated her alimony. We calculated her pension. We calculated his 401k. And once we could get her to calm down and get rid of the emotions of let's just make it go away, she realized she was entitled to 25% more than what he was proposing. So we decided that, you know what, I think a lawyer is the best way to go here. And so she considered arbitration and mediation. I found a great lawyer for her in the Silicon Valley area where she was located. And she settled for a lot more than what she would have gotten once you remove the emotion of it. And so it's just good to be aware that your clients might come to you and be very stressed out, and that men might be more inclined to be conflict oriented, where the women might be backing off a little bit more. And you just have to be maybe a little bit more empathic with them, a little bit more patient. There's a difference. So there's when we go through a change, there's a study that came through called the Transtheoretical model of change. And this was happening in the late 70s, but it still pertains today. And it's all the different stages we go through when we're going through through a major change. So let's do a hypothetical. Pivots Points has a divorce client. Let's call her Liz. She's going through life, never thinking about divorce crossing her mind. She's in the pre-contemplation stage of divorce. Nothing's happening, nothing's new. Maybe then something bad happens to her and she's like, maybe I need to start thinking about divorce. This is the contemplation stage where the thought has entered her mind and she's mulling it over. At some point is when she's going to find the situation untenable and she's going to start taking action. This is a preparation stage when she starts to plan on making a move. And this is where we at Pivot Points comes in typically, is the part from pre-contemplation to contemplation to the action stage. A lot of people get stuck in the preparation stage because they're unsure of where to go and what to do. And so we walk them through creating a succinct plan with steps to get them through to the action stage. Final stage is maintenance, and that's just important to keep your clients engaged, continuing to encourage them to be curious about their future goals and desires so they can continue to move past the stage of change. There's some psychological benefits of working as a team, as a lawyer versus being the superstar lawyer. And we have found that with Pivot Points as well, with our clients, in engaging a team of professionals together instead of just one-on-one. Because individuals vary in the degree in which they seek out social connections, humans share a fundamental need to interact with a lot of people. The Global Council on Brain Health states that from a brain health perspective, people who are more socially engaged tend to have a higher level of cognitive function and stronger hippocampus. The hippocampus is the area of the brain that is involved in new memories, learning, and emotion. They also have a lower risk of cognitive decline and dementia later in life. So supportive social networks can come in different forms and play different roles in one's life, but they're all really critical. There's emotional support when one's able to listen quietly and to a client or a friend without judgment. This is really important during stressful times and when people are feeling lonely. There's instrumental support where one's network takes care of all the physical needs. And then the informational support, and I think that's where most of us professionals come in, is where the majority, where you can provide guidance, advice, information, and mentoring. This type of support is important when clients are making really big decisions or big life changes. Clients will feel less anxious and stressed out with the problems they're trying to solve if you listen quietly and provide some really just good, solid, step-by-step guidance. So there's an effect that's called superstars versus having an effective team. And there was a Harvard Business School study that I came across that suggests, there was a Harvard Business School study that measured the success rate of more than 200 cardiac surgeons, examining patient survival rates of highly experienced freelance superstars compared to those that had surgical teams. Now, when the superstars left and performed surgeries at different hospitals, their success rate turned to baseline. And the findings were that working with a bonded team of colleagues helps develop interactive routines that harness unique talents of each team member. Everyone's star only shines with the support of their bonded colleagues. Now, if anyone saw the Super Bowl on Sunday, you could argue that, well, Tom Brady was doing it on his own. But he brought Gronk along, and I think there's something to be said for he is a leader that fosters a team wherever he goes. There's a neuroscience of leadership and behavior and teamwork. The social systems of human brain seek safety, inclusion, fairness, and authenticity from leaders and fellow members as an integral function to our survival within a society. And a lot of this happens unconsciously. So leaders, and these are you professional women, that engender genuine feelings of safety, fairness, authenticity, and openness actually help to trigger a chemical in the brain called oxytocin. That chemical, among other benefits, makes people feel more receptive and genuinely trust you deeply. Now, the human brain can also perceive changes as a threat and react negatively. So it's really incumbent on leaders to be aware that their clients might be feeling a great deal of stress and understand their fears and motivations and their reactions to change. So why do teams work? A team implies collaboration, communication, acknowledgement of a common purpose. A team with a positive mood is built on foundations of encouragement, a sense of humor, and expectations of success. A team is critically important to a woman going through a major life transition. Because again, going back to the let's make it go away, the wanting to avoid the conflict. So having a team approach and collaborating together, having the deeper discussions and the authentic discussions really foster a sense of trust and a feeling that everyone's got your back. What makes a good team great is emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is defined as the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathically. Now, while decades of research highlights emotional intelligence as critical ingredients that distinguish leaders, it's also important for team performance. There are 6 ingredients for a successful, emotionally intelligent team. Number 1, they clarify and re-clarify norms for every new member that comes on board. So they don't have to guess about unspoken rules. They're told what the team expects and what norms are expected of them. And they also all revisit as to whether those norms are still appropriate. They use curiosity to strengthen relationships. Weigh-in creates buy-in. So they use inquiry as a vehicle for finding the right solutions. Curiosity fuels confidence. Number 3, their environment is psychologically safe. That means that team members won't be punished for making mistakes. It's okay to speak one's mind and to question the status quo, which is paramount for a team to excel because the more you question, the more you learn, the more aware you become. They balance relationships with tasks. So smart teams operate along the spectrum with goal achievement on one end and relationship building on the other. So goals need to be met, obviously, but not at the expense of creating poor relationships with your colleagues, which will in turn possibly not be collaborating with you in the future. So they balance those relationships. They prioritize team learning. So they hold after action reviews. They identify 3 things: what they're intended to achieve, what they did achieve, and what caused the difference. In doing so, they build a team's collective awareness about each other and the team's mission at hand. Lastly, they listen to each other. They don't want to speak, but instead actively listen without formulating in their minds what they want to say next. As more studies show that most effective leaders and teams are the ones that possess emotional intelligence, it becomes clearer that emotional intelligence and vulnerability go hand in hand in empathic transactions. The definition of vulnerability is the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being emotionally or physically harmed. And Brené Brown coined this term about vulnerability 7 years ago, and is still talking about it, and it's really important. More studies are showing that the most effective leaders and teams are ones that possess emotional intelligence and vulnerability. But how do we all become vulnerable overnight? It's really very difficult work. So what I think is, I believe that if you bring an awareness to what gets in the way of us becoming more vulnerable in our interactions with clients and colleagues and peers, it's an important step in moving closer to a more open, authentic self in business and personal transactions. So the three main impediments of becoming vulnerable. Number one is catastrophizing. Now, if you've ever been hesitant to talk to a professor or give a peer a negative or unpleasurable, comment or feedback, what's holding you back? Sometimes it can be you're feeling there's going to be a significant irrational response from them. In work with your boss, it might be that you feel like you're going to get fired on the spot. That's called catastrophizing. The medical term for it is called cognitive distortion. And it's when somebody assumes that the worst is going to happen, or that there's going to be an over exaggeration of the perceived difficulties that one faces. And these feelings are real. As humans, we're subconsciously tapped into others' emotions. When we enter conversations tense, the recipient immediately puts their guard up too. When we sense an emotion is someone else, when we sense an emotion in someone else, but we don't really know the reason, our brain is furiously trying to figure that out. And in doing so, we'll catastrophize sometimes to protect ourselves from perceived slights or an overreaction or danger. It's a coping mechanism, and there's active brain research on this phenomenon. But it can also hinder our communication style and our ability to open up and be authentic in conversations. My particular penchant for catastrophizing revolves around the bag lady syndrome. This is a term coined in the 1970s, and it's completely out of date, but it's a real syndrome. And what that is that women start worrying about being financially destitute and living on the streets, carrying all their possessions in a shopping bag. And for several years, I had the luck and good fortune of being the top tier of female wage earners in the United States. However, I was always convinced I was going to be fired at a moment's notice and live in a station wagon under the freeway overpass. It made absolutely no sense. It was irrational. That was my bag lady syndrome. The catastrophizing continually added stress in my life and hindered me from truly acknowledging that I had enough money to live on, that with a solid budget, I could retire okay and safe. The catastrophizing kept me in a quiet personal shame spiral that was unproductive and energy zapping. So as professionals and peers, we can be aware that clients can be experiencing their own unique type of catastrophizing and bag lady syndrome. And so you might have to ask some more probing questions to get to the heart of why they might not be moving forward.
Suzanne, actually, I wanted to ask about this particular thing because, I think that when many of us end up going to law school, you hear all of this advice that, it's going to be so difficult and it's going to be so hard and you need to do all of these things in order to be successful in law school. And so many of us, go into it already with this amped up anxiety that this is going to, really impact our lives in an adverse way, right? And so when we're in law school, it's almost like it's celebrated when you're working at all hours of the night. And when, it's almost like everyone's competing for who's doing the most, who's, sleeping the least, who's not taking care of themselves the least. I mean, I think that you put yourself in this bubble where you expect it to be bad, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do you see that a lot among, professionals in careers that are supposed to be like more stressful?
That's a really interesting question. I think what that comes down to is, you're absolutely right. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, one of the goals with catastrophizing is being aware of it, like you are, and then to say, what's the worst case scenario? So it's a little different than the self-fulfilling prophecy. The catastrophizing is more of, this honestly will probably never, ever happen. Whereas you're in a situation where this exactly is going to happen. So, so that's not necessarily a hindrance to you. It's a different phenomenon altogether.
Yeah.
So, but if you were in a situation where you were, say, dealing with a trial, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to lose this case, and these are the 15 reasons why. And then what you need to do is back up and say, okay, well, what is the probability and likelihood of this happening and this happening and this thing happening? And so it's almost like talking yourself off a ledge. But it's a little bit different than what you're speaking about, where you're going into a profession and you already know the expectations. And there's not necessarily a great rationale behind why they are making you do what you're doing, but it's a little bit different.
Okay.
What I'm talking about with the bag lady syndrome is, it's a complete irrational response, but it's still very real. So
Sure.
that's the other things that hinder, I think, vulnerability in our professional life and with clients is authenticity and trust. So one of the things that happened to me in 2007, when the recession hit, there were layoffs all over the place, and especially in the financial industry. And a friend of mine was in the same industry, and she had a boss who was continually painting a positive outlook for their future, would not acknowledge their concerns about job security, and skirted their questions, especially the hard ones. So in turn, they followed suit and put onto their clients the same incongruously positive message to them. So this created a false hope, dishonesty, and worse yet, an erosion of trust, which bled from the company into the clients' lives for 2 years, and they ended up losing a great deal of clients. So trust comes from being vulnerable and having the hard conversations, for saying, I don't know, but I do acknowledge your concerns and I will find out. It's being human, authentic, transparent, and transparency breeds respect and trust. And not only is trust important for a client and a company morale, but it also can affect the bottom line. I thought this was really interesting because I'm in finance. A study by Trust Fund found that high trust companies frequently outperform the S&P 500. There was a 6-year study done that was completed in 2018 on the Russell 1000 companies, and they focused on outperformance, corporate integrity, conservativeness, transparency, and sustainability. And on average, over the long term, the top 10 most trustworthy public companies outperform the S&P by 25% since inception. So transparency is key. Lastly, ego and amnesty. So ego gets in the way of vulnerability, and we all have it, especially as you rise up the ranks in the legal profession. Everybody puts on an air of confidence, etc. And I get it, and everyone needs to, but I think you need to have more of the true, honest, real conversations to actually get learn and grow. And so let me tell you about something that happened that I think is really interesting. It's a program that the Federal Aviation Administration puts on, and I'm a pilot. And what it is, it's an amnesty program. So when I was actively flying, they put out a monthly report sharing stories from all pilots that have crashed. they've crashed their planes and they've learned to tell about, they live to tell about the story and the events that happened leading up to the crash. So most of the stories were a complicated setup of the perfect storm. Some were simple mistakes. A handful were kind of downright terrifying. But the program highlighted that we're all infallible. We all make mistakes. And by us sharing our stories, whether they're embarrassing, silly, or harrowing, we all become better learning from each other. So check your ego at the door, because it really has no place in growing and learning. Now, as adults and professionals and as clients, we can enhance our overall experience with each other as we move through life by being brave enough to be more of ourselves and admit, that we have stories to share, we've got questions worth answering, we can and should expect transparency and to be provided with guidance thoughtfully. And as women, I think we can achieve a lot by not only being aware, but owning our differences as females, as clients, as professionals. We have unique needs surrounding our thoughts about finances. We have different coping styles in times of stress and conflict. And we can and should expect authenticity and transparency in our daily interactions with everyone. So being aware of and advocating for our unique needs as women will bring about a greater sense of well-being, confidence, and confidence in each other. So that's kind of what my presentation is about, how we are very different and we should be treated. We should acknowledge that we are different in a male-dominated society, and move forward acknowledging that we own our differences and we can be just fine and confident with each other and just raise everyone else up with us. So thank you, Angie.
Thank you. So are there like set stages that every single person going through a life transition feels?
Yes. Well, so that's going back to the Transtheoretical model. So you've got the stage where you are thinking everything is just going along great, and there's nothing that's pushing you one way or another. So then you're going to go through the pre-contemplative stage, the contemplation stage, the action stage. And so it's more of a subconscious that we're even going through these stages. But it's really when we are working with clients, we have to really figure out what stage they're in, because a lot of our clients, we can start down the path with them. And for us, that means usually we're creating a financial baseline for them and all the financial summaries. They will look at that, and then we don't hear from them for several months. And then all of a sudden they come back and they're like, okay, I'm ready now. So it's like, it's a subconscious situation where you can mull it over, but you never really know exactly at what time frame you're going to be ready. So there has to be a patience from the other end, and know that they'll come when they're ready. But if you start them too soon, it can have bad effects. They can end up retreating further back and being even more hesitant. So it's a juggling act.
Yeah. I know as I was moving through my major life transitions, it's funny because sometimes you hit a life transition that all of a sudden you feel like you cannot positively overcome, even though you go through so many in your lifetime. And if you stop to think about what have you done in your lifetime where you've overcome, huge challenges or huge transitions, and you process like for a second, like, okay, I started off feeling really anxious. Then, eventually I started, losing self-esteem, feeling like, oh, I was just not going to be able to get through this. And then you kind of acknowledge like, okay, no, I've done some harder things in my life before. I can do this. And you start to, build up a little hope. You get a little bit more self-esteem. You get a little bit more optimistic, but it takes a while to move through all those stages. And, and I think that sometimes we take a look at new challenges and think like, oh, okay, there's no way that we can overcome this. But if you pause and think about, the resilience that you've built up over time and understand that, okay, I just need to move through all these stages. Like there's going to be a point where I start feeling better about this, but maybe that means, I need to go find support. Maybe that means I need to go find help. Maybe I need to go find my community, or maybe that means I need to go find an expert or somebody to walk me through this, something. But I think for women especially, we tend to try to take everything on ourselves, and we want to, we want to be the people that people go to whenever they're struggling, but we find it really hard to do that for ourselves. And
You're
so,
absolutely right.
yeah.
Can I, going back to what you said about perspective is critical. And I know you guys are all just starting out in your careers, and it's really exciting. And if you could figure out a way to get perspective, to take the time, and just as you said, to see where you've been and see all the accomplishments that you've made, it is so critical. A lot of us spend our whole lives just running, accomplishing the next thing, getting to the next goal. And I don't think that serves us well. I think, having that time to say, look, I did get through this. And then when it becomes daunting of making that next change, first of all, having a team. So surround yourself with your support system, whether it's friends, your parents, and talk it through. But also having steps, if you can put it down and break it down into bite-sized pieces, into, okay, what's the first step? What's the second step? Okay, it just all of a sudden becomes very clear. And that's, it sounds so simple and obvious, but that's what we do with our clients. Let's just take away the chaos and distill the noise, and let's get a step-by-step plan for you. And all of a sudden, everything, we make it fall into place. And to have other people there to remind you too. It's like, Angie, is that really what you said you were going to do? And to hold you accountable too for that is really critical.
But staying connected with people can be really intimidating. I know a lot of law students, they're tempted to say like, okay, when I start my first year, I'm just going to like withdraw from all my family members and friends, and I'm just going to focus on law school, and this is all I'm going to do. But that's kind of the last thing that you should be doing. I think you really, and your friends and family should be pretty understanding. If you talk to them and just say like, hey, I still need your support now more than ever, especially as I go through this in my life. And, yes, I will need it in a different way. I'm going to be really busy and I won't be able to keep in touch all the time, but that doesn't mean I need your support any less. I think that it's important to stay connected to the people that you have, and also find other people who have walked the path that you have walked, right? And get support in them. I think that a lot of students are tempted to just try to figure it all out on their own. And I'm like, no, go talk to an upperclassman, go talk to a lawyer, go talk to somebody who's done this before, so that you understand what to anticipate. And, law school is like the last time that you should be isolating yourself into a hole. That's when you should be really reaching out and trying to find your connections, finding your support system. And yeah, it takes some time to build, but once you have it, you'll feel so much better for it.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think to add on to that, to your mentors and your leaders and your professors, be very clear. You are allowed to expect authenticity from them. So going back to the ego, if they're brushing you off, or you're feeling you're not sensing that they're being vulnerable and truthful to you, find somebody else, because it's not going to serve you, and it's going to be a waste of time.
Oh, totally. There are some lawyers that, they put up this big, ego, and they say, I only want to talk to you about the things that I'm really successful in. And they don't want to talk to you about all the difficult things that they've endured. And you're not going to be able to learn as much from them.
Right.
I always make sure that if I'm going to find mentors that I can talk to, that, when I share my vulnerabilities, like they share theirs too. We've all faced difficult times. And if your mentor's only sharing with you like their greatest highlight reel,
right.
Probably not the best mentor for you,
That's completely right. And I think it's just so great. The earlier you can learn that, the better, because it will serve you well for the rest of your life, because we're all human. We all make mistakes, right?
Yeah,
That's how you learn.
and it's I think once we build up a certain amount of success in our lives, we're scared to show all those times that we fell down. We're scared to show when we were weak. We're scared to show, how hard it was for us to get started. And that only makes it, all the harder for the people who are trying to learn from us to do the same, right? As you were saying, like if you come into it already tense, if you come into it with a certain air that you're presenting, it's going to elicit the same response. So if you come in with barriers, like the other person's going to come in with their own barriers.
Right.
So yeah, no, I would love to, get some thoughts from the audience. Do you guys have things that you're struggling with? What are your questions for Suzanne? Let's see. We've got some comments here in the chat box. We've got some people that said, I think studying online and away from campus has really affected my coping mechanisms for law school. I really enjoyed classes away from home and I had a great community, but now it's harder to separate work from home life. Yeah, totally get it. What are your thoughts, Suzanne, for people who are struggling with this transition where they're now remote working in their house and they're surrounded, by their family and trying to balance all of that at the same time?
Well, I think exactly what you're doing, having these kind of collaborative social times where everyone can share their own ideas and talk about this, because, and yes, we all love our families, but they don't, and they think they have our best interests at heart, but they only have what's best for them for you. See what I'm saying? What they want for you is really what they want for themselves. So it's you have to be very clear and set those boundaries with them, right? And to your point of what you said before about having your support system and saying, hey, I am really focused here, and it doesn't mean I don't care any less about you, but I have got to focus, and I am going to be non-existent for the next 36 hours. I'll resurface. But so you've got to be able to manage people's expectations and build those boundaries to say, and come in for support when you need it. And just be very clear about the people, though, that you're looking to for support and what their agenda is. Even if it might be a subconscious agenda, just like having family members in the house with you.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I find that, especially as an entrepreneur, your work and your personal life just bleed into each other all over the place. Like there's just, if you don't set your own boundaries, oh my gosh, it's a mess, right? So, and I've been working from home now for a couple of years, doing this business. And so I had to learn how to find those own boundaries for myself. I had to say, okay, this is going to be my work time. I'm going to, try to block off big chunks of work time, 2-3 hours here, 2-3 hours there. And then I'll block off some personal time. I'll go to the gym during lunch. I'll try to, find where my personal time will fit in. But you do kind of have to separate those spaces for yourself, and maybe that is, finding a way to transition. Like for me, it was really hard to go straight from like work, like then to all of a sudden, being in a social environment with my family. Like I needed some transition time in between that. Like I needed like some me time, like, so I said, like, after work, I'm going to take 15 minutes to just like do a meditation, do some yoga, do something to just like wind down, and then I can like embrace the rest of the world. But like,
yeah, and that's critical, and good on you for acknowledging that and being very clear, because I think it takes a lot of time, and I think it's a lot of work to sit down and say, what do I want? And what can I handle, and what do I need here? And it's almost like as much work as going to law school is to try and figure out, how am I going to get through this? I have to be clear. I have to write down steps, or, and each person's different. Some people are more fluid. They can go about their day and blend and flow. And other people need to have kind of a step-by-step regimen. I get up at this time. This is my meditation time. This is my workout time, and be very clear and stick to it, especially when you're living in the confines of a small place with other people coming in and out all the time.
And they're
Yeah.
all pulling at your time.
Yes. Yeah. But it's, if there's one silver lining in COVID, which there really isn't, but it does help you prioritize because you're in a situation that will probably never happen again, where you're in a confined space. And so the lessons we're learning about, okay, I've got to be very clear on my needs, and I've got to be very clear on my time and my boundaries. That's going to set you up for life in whatever you do.
Yeah, I think the lessons that you shared with us today are also so helpful because many of, the students on this call are going to go on to be lawyers and advisors in their own
Mm-hmm.
right. And you're going to deal with clients that go through these life transitions. You're going to have to help other people manage these life transitions. I don't know how many of you guys might be thinking about going into family law or going into probate or going into an area where you're going to be advising individuals, through their life transitions. But these are all good tips to understand, not only for yourself as you go through your own life transitions, but also for your clients. Because you're supposed to be an advisor and a counselor and help people go through that. So these were so helpful to know today. So thank you so much for sharing. Do we have any more questions in the chat box? Feel free to type them there or jump on camera and ask away. Suzanne, for people who are going to be kind of starting law school in, the near future, like next year or in the fall or something, do you have any advice or tips on things that they can do and to ease that transition?
It's a great question. I think, as you had mentioned before, you're talking to people that have been through it, and mentors and advisors. But I also think getting clear on what your goals are, and those are going to change all the way along. But you've got to have some kind of goal or carrot that you're focused in on. And then, yes, your path might zigzag a little bit, but what's the end result for you? Whether it's the degree, whether it's making sure you get this one class that you absolutely need, or the one professor you absolutely want. There's got to be, you can set yourself up for these mini goals. So even though the first year can be really chaotic and you're just meeting people and you're just trying to figure everything out, if you have those tangible, write it down, put it up where you just know, okay, well, this is still my goal. And you can have lots of little goals, but it keeps you from kind of spiraling. And people like me, who I'm one of these terrible people that every shiny object I am chasing after. So I have to have these tangible goals that I wake up every morning and I see them, and that's where I'm going. So I would say first year, going through that transition, it's chaos. And understand that about yourself too. It's give yourself a break. It's going to be chaotic, and but have these tangible goals for you to reach. And as you said before, get perspective, get that quiet time where you can look back week by week or month by month and say, hey, look where I've come. Look what I've done.
Yeah,
Because there's so much being thrown at you constantly.
exactly. No, that's great advice. I think as far as, mini goals go, don't forget once you accomplish those goals to celebrate those mini wins.
Yes,
I think,
absolutely.
right alongside that, I think that, while the goal helps you, keep your eye on the prize, if you just keep looking from one goal to the next goal to the next goal to the next goal and you don't take that time to like celebrate your little mini wins, you can get real caught up in all that and feeling like you're never accomplishing much. But if you look at all these little mini goals and you celebrate the ones that you've achieved, then it helps you get a sense of accomplishment and feel like, okay, I'm doing this for a purpose. I understand that I'm like progressing through this. I think that some mini goals, even just surviving another semester of law school is like a good mini goal because, law school is hard, right? Just like checking off that box and being like, okay, now I'm going to start looking for internships, or now I'm going to start applying for extracurricular activities, or I'm going to identify, which practice area I'm interested in, whatever it is, find these little mini goals for yourself and make sure that you're celebrating your little wins along the way. For
Yeah, and I think that really builds confidence. So I came from, the financial area, and being on the floor of the stock exchange was complete chaos. You're in the trading pits and screaming and yelling, and every day it's just the bell rings and you trade, and then the bell rings and you're done, and then the next day and the next day, and then in finance moves so fast, and investment banking, same thing. It was just crazy. Every 15 hours to 18 hours every day, and it really took me years after removing myself from those positions for me to get perspective of like, whoa, okay, take a breather. Look what I accomplished. But had I had the recognition early on to take that time to acknowledge accomplishments along the way, I think I would have been confident a lot sooner and been much more calm with myself, and instead of just running and reacting. So I think it's really imperative to celebrate those small goals all the way along.
What about for those of us who eventually maybe want to pursue a family after, we get out of law school and we're practicing and we want to have a family? What are your suggestions for people that may be pursuing that life transition?
um, you've got to be very clear on getting a support network. I don't care who it is, but you cannot raise a child by yourself. And if you want to have a partner, they have to be in it 100% as well. Because I will tell you, being a mom is exhausting. It's lovely, but to do your family and to do a job, it takes two people, at least two people. If not, if you can get a team of people, then you can really have a good life balance. But there's no way, if you don't have somebody in your corner that's willing to help you raise this child, you're not going to be effective as a lawyer. You're just not, because this little human being is going to take up at least 80 to 90% of your time. So you have to share.
For sure. As they're starting to prepare for that, are there people that you suggest that they consult, financial planners, or like who should they be looking to talk to?
So that's one thing we do. When you're preparing for a baby, we find out, first of all, what are your goals? What kind of childcare are you going to want? What kind of school do you want down the line? Do you want if you don't have a financial plan for them set up, let's get you a 529 program immediately, so you can have a tax deferred educational account for them, an IRA for them. You're going to have a will. You're going to have durable powers of attorney. So getting the right estate plans in place is really critical. And so these are all the things that you're going to have to think about. And they're going to have to change. If you're in a law office, you're going to have to change your 401k probably just to bump it up. You're going to have beneficiary changes. So there's a lot of estate planning that goes on, and a lot of financial decisions that are critical, and and educational choices. And also, maybe do you want to move? If you're going to have a baby, is this the right educational setting for them? Or do I need to bump up my salary, so therefore I need to move to a different city? So there's a lot of financial decisions that have to be made prior to giving birth that I think are imperative.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of my friends, who have gotten married and they're just starting out to have their children, they realize right away that, oh my gosh, there's just so much to think about, and they don't even know where to begin. They don't know where to start. So it's amazing that there are people like you out there who help people through these life transitions. I think it's so helpful to have just somebody who is a third party that's like objective and
Yes.
can help walk you through things, because it can be really hard when it's yourself to think about all these things, because I think they're very personal decisions. They're very emotionally charged decisions, and it can be really helpful to have like a third party who's neutral who can walk you through all of it. So
Right, and it's true, and so the same we do this with marriage as well, because it's really important that when people come into a marriage, they know what assets and debts are coming in that the other person's bringing in. And also, if the other person has a company, well, is it an LLC? What is it? Is it in their name? Is it something that I have found clients that they've been helping with a company all the way along in the marriage, and come to find out in a divorce, their name's not on it anywhere, and they get no piece of that company. So having those discussions up front prior to getting married, then people can come in with a clear head. They know what their finances are, and they know what their goals are, because marriage is not just love. It's a business relationship. And so you don't want to be blindsided down the way. And also, if you guys are very clear about financially how you're feeling ahead of time, then you're kind of freed up to just love each other and enjoy your time together. It's not worrying constantly. So if you can get your assets set up ahead of time of, okay, well, what are we going to contribute to the household together? What do you bring in? What are we going to have prenups? And all of this, it's so important to just have that ahead of time. Then, just getting your house in order.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate
you, Angie,
all these words of wisdom with us. And we'll be back again on Thursday with another meetup. And we also have our virtual happy hour this Friday. So if you're looking for opportunities to actually connect with people and be social, come to our happy hour, because we'll actually break people out in one-on-one breakout rooms. You'll get to chat with other people. So it'll be fun. So come hang out with us on Thursday and Friday. And thank you so much again, Suzanne, for being here.